Hello, friends. Welcome, Marcia. I saw you just came in. Um, we're, I'm so really happy to be with you as during this changing of the seasons, and uh, here in the United States, at least, it's a big change in our whole future. And so, coming out of a October that was pretty intense and yet full of hope for Writing Beyond, for sure, with our campaign that you'll hear a little bit about in a few minutes. But as we turn towards the winter time coming upon us, we're looking for some peace to carry us through this long march of the pandemic and so many things in our lives. So I'm going to start with lighting a candle. So I'm lighting this candle as a beacon of light in our times, a, 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 a lighting of the fires within that will nurture us, light the way to peace, to our own inner peace. And we're calling in the ones who teach us to hear and see more than our usual senses offer. Calling in the horse's history-long partnership for empowering us to enter new frontiers. Calling in their power for returning us to our hearts, where our greatest resources reside. Calling in a restoration of our relationship with the natural world, and calling in a balance of the fierce energies all around us. So let's start with holding out our hands. And in one hand, we hold compassion and gratitude and joy. And in the other, we hold the sorrow, loss, suffering that is present with us. These two, taking them to our hearts and holding the fullness of this time. And as we hold that within our hearts, practice a moment, the Tonglen practice of breathing in the challenges of our times, of your life, of our lives, the stresses that are upon us with children, homeschooling, with our yearning for hugs, our so many things, whatever it is, breathing that in. And then on the out breath, breathing out peace and healing and wisdom and love and strength. So breathing in pain and confusion, fear, anxiety, whatever that might feel like. And then breathing out peace, healing, wisdom, love. It's a practice of compassion, Tonglen in the Buddhist world. Thank you. So I want to thank Denise, who's our techie person who's hosting us today. And Jen will be with us here shortly with her horses, Peggy calling in the directions, and Mary Beth with her poetry. And Rosalie Maple is here today speaking on behalf of our board of directors. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rosalie for just a few seconds. Thank you, Rosalie.
First of all, I want to, on behalf of the board, share with you our appreciation for all that you've done to support Writing Beyond by your presence here and financially. Those gifts of presence and donations have made a difference. Writing Beyond will be sustained through this year, which was a very difficult year. I wanted to share with you our successful Horses Creating Hope, and reminding you that H stood for honoring those on the breast cancer journey. O was offering the horse-human connection. P stood for the programs for physical, emotional, and spiritual healing. And then E, representing empathy, encouragement, and empowerment. We raised $17,344 in this campaign, which allowed us to meet our budget this year, which was a celebration for us. Going forward, the board is in the process of planning for 2021, seeking new ideas and resources for our program to return to a fresh form of face-to-face sessions that works within the pandemic requirements. We continue to look for an opportunity for a research project where we can validate scientifically the healing power of the horse-human connection. And we certainly welcome more volunteers if you're not a volunteer already, particularly ones that might have experience with grant writing and financial management. So climb aboard with us into our galloping to greatness with Writing Beyond.
Thank you, Rosalie. All right. Okay. So let's take a journey together to peace. I think sometimes during these times, I don't know about you, but just little things trigger me out of the state of peace. Actually might be interesting for us to put into the chat some of the things that just where you're at, you know, in terms of what triggers your insecurity, fear, anxiety. What is it that that about these times that's troubling? That is it's kind of an overwhelm at times, and yet it's kind of a roller coaster too. So as I speak here for a moment, let's just, if you would, just enter a little bit about your own experience of these times, and maybe you're not experiencing, you know, the good times as well. Go ahead and put those. But I want to speak to some really valuable information that came to all of us in the therapeutic writing industry through Path International. Michelle Weed, who is a psychotherapist who works with trauma and stress, and is works with horses for that practice in a center on the East Coast. She presented a really informative seminar, and I want to share some of that information with you, and how our horses, what we've learned from horses, help add to this information and giving us skills and tools for coping with the complexities of this time. So first, I want to just say a little bit of introduction about the brain's response to stress and trauma. It's really quite interesting. There's a lot of information available now. If we could have the next slide, Denise. There's a lot of information available about the brain's response. And so we're going to be talking about the window of tolerance. And that describes how much stress we can handle at a given time. That it varies by the place, the time of the day, and a wide variety of circumstances. Before COVID-19, I don't know about you, but it seems to me I could handle a lot more stress at any given time without, and it was just energizing. I was staying within my window of tolerance. But one of the things about these times is that window of tolerance gets narrower. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote an excellent book, I want to read it now, The Body Keeps the Score, said humans are designed for connection. After trauma, the brain and body can prioritize protection over connection. So we'll explore that just a little bit. Many of us have have found that connection, we're kind of connection starved, if you will. And there's implications about the trauma and stress of this time that I think you'll find interesting. So next slide, please, Denise. So we have the brain's response. And this is a kind of a shorthand about the functioning of the amygdala. The amygdala essentially operates as an alarm center. We have some kind of an experience, and it sends a message to the amygdala immediately responds with alarm, but it asks the hippocampus if it sends a message to the hippocampus like, do I need to worry about this? And if the hippocampus says, oh, it's okay, it's fine, then that message goes to the prefrontal cortex and it becomes a memory and it's stored and the alarm goes away. But with a trauma, a traumatic experience, the amygdala asks the hippocampus, is this okay? And the hippocampus says, I don't know. No, it's not okay. So it creates this loop where the amygdala gets an alarm, the hippocampus goes into survival mode, and then it becomes really hard to function fully. So, you know, this is a kind of a stimulus response in this kind of scenario in our brains. But fortunately, there is a lot of plasticity in the brain, and that's what we're going to be looking at in a few minutes, and as to how our brain can be so adaptable. And so in the next slide, please, Denise, then this is what we would, when we're in that stimulus response loop, this is what we may see in others and what we may find in ourselves, that we're experiencing more fatigue. We may have difficulty sleeping. There's being startled easily. Something little can create a startled response that normally wouldn't have. There's difficulty concentrating, find ourselves distractible. There might be a racing heartbeat that just comes out of the blue, and some kind of anxiety has been triggered. There's an edginess and agitation. There might even be physical aches and pains. Muscle tension is another sign of this kind of issue. And then, you know, just feeling numb or, you know, kind of depressed or sad or emotionally reactive more than usual, more tears or even more laughter. So, and so there can just be a general sensory overload with that kind of loop coming in with messages. So next slide, please. This comes from a developmental model about trauma and brain development. It has to do with the development of you know, children and starts with you know, infancy. So the typical development where a child has their survival needs are cared for on the left here, that orange triangle, where then that's you know, they're good, they're stable, they have good regulation of their emotions in their life, and they have healthy social and emotional relationships, and so their cognition and thinking is, you know, very much available for school and learning and thinking and interacting. When there's developmental trauma, when there are survival issues that are not attended to, even in prenatal, but, you know, in infancy and in childhood, if there is not enough food or there's a lot of tension around the house, the survival issues become much larger, and they affect emotional regulation and the regulation of all kinds of functions in the body, and the social and emotional relationships are affected. And so there's not much left for cognition. Children in school have a lot of trouble learning when they're involved in developmental trauma. So, you know, the same kind of pattern can happen for us when we're in these times. On top of the pandemic, we've had the wildfires here, and you know, life goes on. There's other stresses coming to bear. Some of them are the result of that, of those two environmental things, but there's a lot that's causing us to have survival issues come up. This, like we see here with the developmental trauma. So we're going to be exploring some of this again. What we can, what are some of the coping skills? What are some of the things, because of what we know about the brain's plasticity? We're going to be exploring how we can help us get back to, attending to those survival needs and being able to claim some peace. So we're going to be looking at this from the standpoint partly of what we have learned from horses, like their heightened sense of the environment, what they notice, and how that helps us to attune more to our own energies and interpersonal relationships with others, and their discomfort with incongruence in their environment, which helps us to sort of get to the truth of what we're feeling and to work towards congruence of our own. And just the herd dynamics, which some of us, we're really hurting for our own herds, our own human herds. But what is the new form of community that we can claim, which is such a vital part of our being human, and that the horses certainly know a lot about. And then, living from large-heartedness, that it's so important in these times to return to the heart. Just as we started our gathering today, like to reorienting our ego-driven living and in our things that catapult us into anxiety and fear about the future, coming back to the heart, and it is the best starting place for attending to that. And then that nonverbal body language that horses are such experts at. And what does it mean for us to be able to come back to our bodies, and to find the wisdom there that's beyond the spoken word, learning to increase our literacy with the body language. And just to be able to return to the calm that horses are so good at. They have an emotional resilience that I sometimes envy these days. So modulating that energy. So we're going to be sort of holding these concepts as we gather the horses around us, gather their wisdom. And so I'm going to call on, as is our custom, to begin with our mandala of the 7 directions. And so now, Peggy, if you would please join us, and please help us to become aware of this larger herd of beings that within which we are today. Thank you.
Okay, as we call in our horses, Spirit of the East, of the yellow horses, season of spring and place of sunrise, we call you to bring your inspiration and creativity and hope to weave our new story. We thank you for your illumination. Spirit of the South, of the red horses, season of summer and place of growth and harvest, we call you to bring your energy and strength and power to go the distance. We thank you for your warmth and connection. Spirit of the West, of the black horses, season of fall and place of preparation, we call you to bring your powers of introspection and wisdom to our gathering. We thank you for your insight. Spirit of the north of the white horses, season of winter and place of purification, we call you to bring your powers of renewal to each of us and the gathering as we need new hope. Thank you for your patience. Spirit above of the mythical horses, place of spiritual influence and vast beyond, please shine your light on this gathering as we claim resources to sustain us. We thank you for your compassion and tolerance and love. Spirit below of the horses we see and touch, may our connection with them root and ground us in our learning and sharing. Thank you for presence. Thank you for presence. Spirit of the center, we bring our open hearts to the center of this gathering and to our creative endeavor with new hope, refreshed joy, and nurturing one another in our community of horse-human connection.
Oh, thank you so much, Peggy. I went out for a brief walk just before we gathered, and it reminded me that it's more important than ever for us to call in these larger energies of those who can accompany us in these times. This natural world that you so beautifully evoked in the horses, the horse tribe. So we can take a deep sigh, relax, rest into this great orb of being that we've gathered in today. And so now we're going to turn to Jan Lieber's wisdom with the horses. We've had some technical problems in the last few sessions with her live presentation. So she graciously, she and her daughter over the last few days have prepared a video, and Jen is with us this morning, and she's going to hopefully be able to join us after the video, and we can hear more about this. Now, Denise is going to put the video up, right, Denise? And you're going to, we have a little bit of an issue with the audio in this. So Denise, would you please explain how people can turn up their audio if they need to? It's not as loud as it might be, but you can adjust that in your Zoom settings.
Sure, yeah, let me just show you how you can do that. Can you see my screen now?
What we're seeing is the slide of Jen with Journey.
That's good. So now if you need to turn up your volume on this part, if you go to your mute button, there's an arrow next to it. Can you see that? And you go down to audio settings. Okay, you see my audio settings? When you go into that, you can move this output volume up. You can pull that up if you need to increase it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Denise. All right, let's watch the video here.
Okay, let me grab the video. You see the video?
Not yet.
Yeah.
There. You see
Nope.
it?
It just says Denise Krause has started screen sharing.
Okay, how about that?
There it is. Now we got
Okay,
it.
great.
When Tris asked me to work on the piece this month with the horses, we decided we would explore how we stay in, or recognize when we're out of, our window of tolerance. I translated this to Buck Brannaman's idea of keeping you and your horse in the rectangle. I like to call this space our bubble. Like the window of tolerance, the rectangle, or the bubble, is a place of connection, where communication fosters comfort and safety in relationship. Three things important to the horses that allow us to stay in this shared rectangle are the awareness of energy, timing, and space. Practicing these three things with the horses maintains our connection and allows us to remain flexible and responsive, thus keeping us together. Once the horse or the horses and I become reactive, our ability to stay in a shared window of tolerance is greatly reduced. For horses, timing is about being with and just noticing until the timing feels right for initiating a request. Thus, a well-timed invitation gains their willingness. Horses teach me to soften and feel for right timing. Space is the rectangular bubble the horses and I maneuver within. Sometimes it's small and we are deeply connected in our togetherness, and other times it gets much larger as we take in and read the surrounding environment as a way of staying safe. Horses teach me to soften, stay open, and be flexible in our space. Energy, or pressure, is the currency of their communication. The skill of reading energetic signals, sending energy out, drawing it in, adding or releasing pressure are significant to them. Horses teach me to soften and read the subtlest of energies. Softening is the place they look for. It's what they naturally go toward. It's usually a good or even an essential choice for maintaining connection and communication. Thus, we were able to stay in the window of tolerance. It's also an integral part of energetic dynamics. Next, I'll share with you some of the video and photos of the horses and I as I engage in these practices. Look for what's happening inside the space of our bubble or window. When are we in full connection? When does one of us leave the rectangle? It could be as simple as the horse looking down or outside. Anything that takes their focus off what we're doing together. They may not leave the bubble completely, but it's up to me to give us the space and direction for addressing these situations as they arise. See if you can notice the effects of my softening, holding space, and timing of my energetic requests. Try to be aware of when my body is blocking, adding, or releasing pressure and what that may be offering the horses. In this energy video, look for the body language that keeps the horses and I moving together. Is there a particular horse that keeps requesting for something by lowering her head?
Mhm. They each did it. Mhm.
Next, in this timing video, can you see how waiting for right timing sets the tone for gaining cooperation? Even while we're listening, can you see when I'm addressing and readdressing and being mindful of the right time to go together? Did you catch me doing horse breath as a way of focusing our combined energy? Are we still together inside our bubble or the window of tolerance as we negotiate this real-time situation and decide when it's best to go together? In these next two still photos, we're exploring space. Can you see the difference in how we're holding space as a herd in these two photos? In the second photo, did something change in the environment to cause us the essential need to widen our perspective? But even as we did that, are we still connected? Are we missing our fourth want-to-be herd member in the second photo? Can you guess what he may be doing? Well, that's our pup Otis, and he was taken by a herd of turkeys. When he saw them, he put them into flight, which caused us and the horses to need to stop and gather in that new information in our environment.
Mhm.
This last video shows an activity that can leave extra questions and energies around it, coming through a gate. The experience is also heightened by their dinner, a valuable resource which is waiting for them. Body language. Staying together. Resisting the impulse to go to something more interesting. What a sweet little moment. Pearl wanted to check back in before she went to her hay. This is the best of being in the bubble. Thank you for allowing me to share some time with you and some bits of time with the horses. I hope you were able to notice how energy, timing, and space colored our time together. In every moment, I try to be aware of what's happening in the bubble so that neither the horses or I go so far out that disconnection leads to lack of safety. For me, it's always about nurturing and protecting the relationship. Horses are the masters of noticing the space around them. Have you ever felt like your thinking or feelings have trapped you in a repetitive loop that seems there's nowhere to go, and you stop feeling into that present moment? Horses teach me to sense into the environment as a way of gathering new information. This helps widen my perspective, and I notice if I'm stuck in an old story. This was kind of illustrated in the driveway when we had to notice Otis and the turkeys and then pause to take in that new information. Horses are the masters of being in the present moment. Have you ever felt so strongly about something that you took action when if you had just stopped and noticed and allowed yourself to soften until you knew for sure it was the right timing, that the outcome may have gathered more willingness? Horses teach me to wait, soften my body and my thinking until together action is taken out of mutual respect. Just like in the video I did in the driveway when we were waiting for all of us to sync up before we started moving forward together again. Horses are the masters of the language of energy. Have you ever felt pressure or energy or feelings building up inside that you ignored until you had no choice but to react? And maybe not in a way or in the response that you had hoped for? Horses teach me to attune to the subtlest of energies. Just like when I use my body language and energy coming through the grass to keep the horses and I moving smoothly together. For me, staying in the bubble means knowing when I'm connected. When I'm unaware of the space around me, I'm too pushed to wait for right timing, or chaotic energy is running my choices, it's very likely I've left the window of tolerance. The horses teach me to wait, soften, stay open, until I have the resources to reconnect. This allows us to ask questions, take in new information, and be gentle with ourselves, so staying in the bubble is a possibility. Managing my space, following right timing, and feeling into subtlest of energies are the skills that the horses so gracious allow me to practice with them. This keeps my window of tolerance open and running at its fullest capacity. Even after a disruption, horses are drawn to peacefulness or going back to grazing. Finding our influence through observing and softening creates space for choice. And when we are able to choose peace or safety, our window of tolerance flings open. And as you can see, when it's working well, the bubble the horses and I partner together in allow playfulness, creativity, intuition, and discovery to be what we do. This is exactly the place I want to be with them. Thank you so much for allowing me to share what horses teach me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. I don't know about you, but I could just feel a sense of calm and focus and joy watching that. Jen, you want to share a little bit about that and your horses before we move on?
Sure. I guess the thing that I love about working with the horses and how they help me is that they really embody inside of me how I'm feeling and how that's projected outward. And so when a heightened situation comes up, like Otis taking off with all the turkeys, it's really important for me to understand that I am in that space with the horses, and how I react and how I hold that space, the timing that I allow them to look, gather the information, all of that is what we're reading together. And in that moment, even though it might be heightened and we could possibly shoot out of the window of tolerance, my ability to stay peaceful, to stay observant, to widen my perspective, allows that window of tolerance to open in a way that we don't actually get terribly disconnected. And that increases our ability to be safe and to continue to work through to the next situation. And I take that with me after I practice with them. It resides inside me. And that's when I can apply it to other places in my life. And it's super helpful.
I love that story.
anybody has-
I love that story you tell about Starbuck. Would you just briefly share that? How you've learned that with him?
Okay, let's see. Are you talking about the story when we were standing next to each other and he decided that he would take read of me instead of his environment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I have this pony and his name's Starbuck. He was adorable. Everybody knew him. And he came from a kind of pampered world. So living out in the wild with me was kind of new, and cows were new to him. And so we were standing in his paddock and up by his shelter, and there was cows at the neighbors, and they came over, and he was standing on the side of me that was in between me and the cows. So when I felt him start to rise up and start to get ready to startle, he was going to spook across my body, which meant he was going to knock me down. And it was really
And
fast.
he had done that.
We
He
didn't
had
even
done
see
that
the cows. I'm
before,
sure he
right?
smelled-
He had done that before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the
He'd been
past.
spooking yeah, right. Spooking because of the cows had been something we'd worked together a really long time. And it was very unnerving to him to smell a cow. Just, I don't know. Anyway, so in that moment when I could tell that he had heightened and that he had sensed these cows and that he was going to have this major, I'm getting out of the window flight reaction, I just grounded my body. And I felt him kind of look to me and decide that I was going to be something he was going to read in his environment. So instead of rolling over me, which he could have easily done, he stopped and noticed that I was breathing and I was grounded. So he did it too. And it was kind of one of those places where he finally got to understand that he could stand his ground with those cows. And as a herd, he and I could build in this tolerance around what we needed to do in the moment, just by widening our perspective, slowing down our timing, slowing down our body, and giving space for us to be able to really read into what was going on and what was possible to happen next. And I was super grateful he didn't run me over. That would have hurt, right?
And it was a big learning to you as well. I remember you telling us at the time. So let's just thank you, Jen, so much for that. And so let's carry these little scenarios with us as we move forward and sort of explore the way to peace. And so, Denise, if we could go back to the slides now about brain-based approaches to help clients after trauma. So this is a model that psychotherapists work out of. For many years, the approach on the right was the primary one, which was called a top-down approach, which was based on talk therapy, helping clients to think differently about their experiences. More recently, there are, on the left, you see the bottom-up approaches, which help the clients cope with their raw emotions and defense reactions. And then they are able to think more clearly, as we saw in that developmental model, until these survival issues that are just automatic are dealt with. They can't really think that clearly, and the talk therapy isn't going to be very effective. And so let's move on to looking at some of the skills that we can utilize to benefit ourselves by addressing the body. So, Jen was just talking about staying grounded with Starbuck during that episode. And so that's an important thing for us to remember how to do. So let's just, for a moment, let's just practice grounding and notice how that feels. So sitting in your chair and feeling your feet on the ground and your back against your chair. look around you and just pick 6 objects that either have blue in them or 6 objects that have a circular shape. Just looking around where you're sitting, I'm looking for a circular objects. And notice that as you do that, as you focus on that little task, notice how your breathing gets deeper and calmer as you investigate your environment that way. So going to the next slide, please. It's important for us to measure these, what may seem incremental changes, but it's important for us to measure them because that's how our brain learns. Brené Brown's work, which is really excellent in many of these matters, is if you can't measure it, does it exist? So it's important to give some subjective units of measurement of your distress, measuring from 0 to 10, where 10 is the worst distress you could be in, and 0 is no distress, complete relaxation. And so to notice that when you find, as we move through some of these coping skills and little exercises, notice, where you are on a scale of 0 to 10, and the body learns with that. So let's move to the next slide. So I want to explain a little bit more about the window of tolerance. Again, it has to do with how much stress we can handle at any given time. So between these 2 lines is that window of tolerance, the 2 blue lines. So you get activated, and then there's a settling. And so there's this kind of up and down motion. The somatic signs are, regulation, repair, ease, grounded, settled, being settled, and pain symptoms lower. And then the mental emotional signs are calm, curious, playful, that kind of an attitude about the activation and settling, you see, so that there's kind of a cooperation, you find a completion of tasks, you feel a sense of spontaneity with it. It's exciting, and empathy is available, and your creativity emerges with that. But, in times of stress like we're in now, that bandwidth can become quite narrow. And so our goal is to expand it, as stated here, but first we have to be in it. We have to be able to be within the window of tolerance, and that's sometimes challenging. So let's go to the next slide, which explains a little bit about how that happens. You're in the window of tolerance, and something happens to trigger your stress. Some kind of stress comes in, and you can go into hyper arousal, where you're overly vigilant. You're maybe too quick and intense in your reactions. You may feel a lack of safety and overwhelming emotions. And then going back into the window of tolerance, where you're looking for the ability to think and feel at the same time. You may actually, in order to cope with some stress, fall into hypoarousal, which is being shut down, flat, or numb as a way of coping. It's hard to think. You feel disconnected from other people, and maybe disconnected from yourself, and feeling shame even, or that you can't say no. These are the 2 extremes, between like anxiety and hyper awareness and the hyperarousal, and a kind of depression and shutdown with hypoarousal. And the next slide shows us the another helpful aspect of this, that as we move out of the orange zone of love and creativity and groundedness and joy, that there's this, as you enter this arousal, there's anxiety, there's the fight and flight stages that happens with panic attacks and rages, but then you can just go over the top and into the freeze, where you find the numbness and the dissociation and the withdrawal. And so you're looking for ways to be able to be mobilized and to stay within, an area where you can be more functional and comfortable. So moving on to the next slide, this shows too how, where you're in that window of tolerance and a traumatic event comes in. It can trigger you up and down as you're coping with it, but then sometimes people get stuck in the on position. And this is the PTSD that we hear about with veterans, war veterans. And it's often an issue that with our breast cancer survivors. It's an issue with all of us who have undischarged traumatic stress where we haven't been able to attend to it. And then the opposite of that is that you plunge down into depression and flatness and lethargy. Okay, next slide. So there's a number of things that we can offer ourselves, and that's what I want to talk about today. It's not about our being therapists, although those models come from the therapy world. These are things that we can offer ourselves and our friends, and they're really helpful. Mindfulness techniques with meditation. Some of you are probably familiar with that. Another one is butterfly hugs. So I want us all to just take a moment to practice the butterfly hugs, because these are really powerful and yet a little simple activity. Let me move my screen down here a little bit. It basically has to do with the fact that if you have cross-lateral stimulation of your body, that helps soothe and calm your autonomic nervous system. So what do you want? So the way you can do this is you take your hands like this. You're going to create a butterfly with them by crossing your hands like this, and then putting them against your chest, and then tapping one side and then the other, kind of hugging yourself. And you may start off going rapidly, but what you want to do is to just slow it down, and that has the effect of calming the body in a way that all the talk in the world can't accomplish sometimes. Night before last, I was just on the edge of going to sleep, and my dog started barking like crazy, and it startled me awake. And I wasn't able to go back to sleep. My body just was on this startle response. So I just lay there and did this. And, within a few seconds, less than a minute, my body was able to relax. And I didn't have to spend, a half an hour of insomnia before I could get back to sleep. So it's this cross-lateral stimulation that's really important to the body. Some people do it like this. Give yourself a hug this way. And enjoying some deep breathing as you're doing that. So another one is called tapping. It comes out of the EFT tradition, the emotional freedom technique. This is a simplified version of it, which is really helpful. Again, it's incorporating the cross-lateral stimulation. So you can just do it with me. It's first tapping up here above your eyebrow on the left side 5 to 8 times, and then going over to the right side just under your eye 5 to 8 times on the bone there, and then crossing to the left side on the collarbone here, just right here, and then underneath your underarm down near the bottom of the rib cage 5 to 8 times. And then Do it with the other hand. The eye, the above the eye, below the eye. Collarbone, beneath the ribs. We're working with energy meridians in the body when we do this. This is something I teach people in the equine specialist certification workshops, and they often utilize it. I encourage them to utilize it for the skills test that they take at the end of the workshop, because everyone has test anxiety. We're all subject to it. And we see them coming in tapping, tapping before they take their test, and they find it really helpful. So, you know, another thing is being on the horse's back and just walking with a horse. This is one of the things that really benefits our participants in Riding Beyond, because the walking on a horse's back has a side to side, back and forth, and rotational motion that puts the body into balance. It soothes the autonomic nervous system and allows us to be able to take the deep breath and to switch off that fight or flight response. So another one is square breathing, which we practiced in some of our other sessions here, which I won't go into it now. But it's, just to describe it briefly, it's taking an in breath to 4 counts, in, 2, 3, 4, and then holding it for 4 counts, and then breathing out for 4 counts, and then pause for 4 counts, and doing that in a sequence of 3 times. And that's a breathing practice that's taught to athletes and a lot of people who are under in stressful situations as a way of coming to calm. So, you know, taking walks, other physical activity, walking, swimming, just getting out and getting the body moving, getting that body engaged, so that we can think more clearly. We can, you know, attend to those survival needs of our body. And then things that soothe our senses, you know, like, what is it? Sitting in the hot tub, you know, maybe a glass of wine in the evening, soothing the senses and noticing the beauty of the changes of the seasons, soothing our senses. So moving ahead to the next slide, just take we're going to move into story time now. So just take a deep breath and imagine, if you will, that you're sitting with the horses here. And carry with you that sense of what Jen was talking about with noticing the horses' movements, and staying in connection. And so we have a story that comes to us from native traditions, and it's as told by Michael Meade. So just cuddle up there, if you will, and listen while we have a bit of story time. The old people of the tribes would tell a special cave where knowledge of the wonders and workings of the world can be found. Even now, some of the people say that the cave of knowledge exists and might be discovered again. They say it is tucked away in the side of a mountain. Not too far to go, they say, yet no one seems to find it anymore. Despite all the highways and byways, all the thoroughfares and back roads that cross-cut the face of the earth, despite all the maps that detail and try to define each area. No one seems to find that old cave. That's too bad, they say, because inside the cave can be found genuine knowledge about how to act when the dark times come around again and the balance of the world tips away from order and slips towards chaos. Something we've known lately, hey? Inside the cave, there lives an old woman who remains unaffected by the rush of time and the confusion and strife of daily life. She attends to other things. She has a longer sense of time and a deep capacity for vision. She spends most of her time weaving in the cave where light and shadows play. She wants to fashion the most beautiful garment in the whole world. She has been at this weaving project for a long time and has reached the point of making a fringe for the edge of her exquisitely designed cloak. She wants that fringe to be special, wants it to be meaningful as well as elegant, so she weaves it with porcupine quills. She likes the idea of using something that could poke you as an element of beauty. She likes turning things around and seeing life from odd angles. In order to use the porcupine quill, she must flatten each one with her teeth. After years of biting hard on the quills, her teeth have become worn down to nubs that barely rise above her gums. Still, the old woman keeps biting down and she keeps on weaving. The only time she interrupts her weaving is when she goes to stir the soup that simmers in a great cauldron at the back of the cave. The old cauldron hangs over a fire that began a long time ago. The old woman cannot recall anything older than that fire. It just might be the oldest thing there in this world. Occasionally, she does recall that she must stir the soup that simmers over those flames, for that simmering stew contains all the seeds and roots that became the grains and plants and herbs that sprout up all over the surface of the earth. If the old woman fails to stir the ancient stew once in a while, the fire will scorch the ingredients, and there's no telling what troubles might result from that. So the old woman divides her efforts between weaving the exquisite cloak and stirring the elemental soup. In a sense, she is responsible for weaving things together as well as for stirring everything up. She senses when the time has come to let the weaving go and stir things up again. Then she leaves the weaving on the floor of the cave and turns to the task of stirring the soup. Because she's old and tired from her labors and because of the relentless passage of time, she moves slowly, and it takes a while for her to amble over to the cauldron. As the old woman shuffles across the floor and makes her way to the back of the ancient cave, a black dog watches her every move. The dog was there all along, seemingly asleep. It awakens as soon as the old weaver turns her attention from one task to the other. As she begins stirring the soup in order to sustain the seeds, the black dog moves to where the weaving lies on the floor of the cave. The dog picks up a loose thread with its teeth and begins pulling on it. As the black dog pulls on the loose thread, the beautiful garment begins to unravel. Since each thread has been woven to another, pulling upon one begins to undo them all. As the great stew is being stirred up, the elegant garment comes apart and becomes a chaotic mess on the floor. When the old woman returns to take up her handiwork again, she finds nothing but chaos, where there had been a garment of great elegance and beauty. The cloak she has woven with great care has been pulled apart. The fringe, all undone, the effort of creation has been turned to naught. The old woman sits and looks silently upon the remnants of her once beautiful design. She ignores the presence of the black dog as she stares intently at the tangle of undone threads and distorted patterns. After a while, she bends down, picks up a loose thread, and begins to weave the whole thing again. As she pulls thread after thread from the chaotic mess, she begins again to imagine the most beautiful garment in the whole world. As she weaves, new visions and elegant designs appear before her, and her old hands begin to knowingly give them vibrant shape. Soon, she has forgotten the cloak she was weaving before, as she concentrates on capturing the new design and weaving it into the most beautiful garment ever seen in the world. And now we'll take about 30 seconds of silence for you to take in the impact of the story for you. Settle into your body and your imagination and attend to what this story says to you. And then we'll be moving into breakout rooms. Okay, now, Denise, if you would go to the next slide, please. We're going to go into our breakout rooms and have an opportunity to share with one another and deepen in our personal experience of this story, working with the Lectio Divina that we've practiced in the past. So Denise is going to put these instructions in the chat so that you'll have them when you move into your breakout room. And so we're going to have as a focus the concluding sentence of the story. And in your breakout rooms, one person first will read that out loud, and you'll just notice what word or phrase you recall. And it can either be from that or from the earlier parts of the story that you've taken in. Then reading number 2, reading again to sink in to it and allow an image to arise in your mind. And then for number 3, along the lines of our attending to our body's wisdom during these times when our cognition and words might be somewhat clouded. What is a gesture that comes to you from the message of this image for you? What is some gesture with your hand or your body that you will take away from this story? So we're going to spend 9 minutes in breakout rooms, and then we'll gather back together and share our gestures with one another. Okay, Denise, if you'll put us into the breakout room, that would be great. Let's close the slide and go to the, there we go. All right. Wow, that was great. We had such entirely different experiences of it. It was just amazing. And I'm looking forward to our sharing our gestures with one another. And Peggy Dean had to leave early, that's right. She told me how on another Zoom session, they they had this, they sort of did it game-like in the sharing. And so I'm going to show my gesture, okay? And then I'm going to call on somebody else, and then that person will show their gesture and then call on somebody else, okay? So here's mine. The gesture that I had is like this, standing up, it's like flowing, and I'm holding in my hand a beautiful silk sari tapestry, from, the kinds of brilliant silks they have in India. That's my gestures, that flow, and seeing it just delicately be touched by the wind. Okay. That just feels really good in my body. Okay. Andrea, is everybody unmuted already? Okay, we have to unmute. There we go. Okay, there we go.
Although I probably really don't need to speak for it.
See, we get yourself in this screen there. Yeah, there you go. Nice. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to
Jen.
do you want to add any
Oh.
words to it?
Well, I was actually curious what your wording was, also that you were gesturing, but mine was capturing the new design.
Okay, cool. All right, you called on somebody?
Jen.
Jen.
Okay, here's mine. Jason, let's see. Way in. I gotta back up. Here we go.
Maybe you need to, we can't exactly see what you're doing. You're a little too close to your screen. Can you move back a little bit?
Am I doing it?
You need to angle the green, or maybe you need to describe what you're doing so that we can tell what we're missing.
Okay. So mine was about it followed Andrea's, and it was about the weaving, but it was instead of a mechanical weaving that you might see drawn in some sort of
Loom?
human form of weaving with a machine. It was about how, as a unit, the horses and I hold a space, and we capture the ideas and the impulses that are in our environment as a unit, and how gently we hold on to those ropes, and how we contain each other
Well, it's kinda like
by a
that.
gentle
Mhm.
bringing to
Kind of like that. Okay.
Mhm.
call on Mary Beth, because her image is the next one we love.
Mhm.
Did you hear me, Mary Beth?
I did, thank you.
Mhm.
And my
Yeah.
image follows the realization of the new design and its perfection and beauty and unexpectedness. And it's,
So let's all do these. Let's do these.
I love that one.
Nice. Okay.
and, oh, Marcia,
Oh, thank you. Thought you'd call on me. Mine was similar because it was like a hug, and I was capturing my feelings about the woman because she felt, I was amazed by her, and she felt so steady, and that she took that in stride to just start recreating. And I felt like she was like a grandmother type, and that she would just hug you. So that was, everything will be okay. We'll put it back together.
Thank you. Who else needs to be called on? Marcia?
Oh, I'm sorry. Andrea? No, Andrea did it. Denise? Denise?
Oh, I didn't actually go to the breakout rooms, but I can tell that I probably would have done something similar to Mary Beth, and then like my heart is full and hope, fullness and hope.
Nice.
Oh, Rosalie?
Mine, my image was the new beginning of threading the needle and having to put the thread through the eye of the needle.
And I love the way you talked about it, the need for focus and
The need-
steadiness to
Right.
do that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Okay, so we're moving into our closing time here. Thank you all for participating in that so beautifully. And in the next few seconds, if you would please enter into the chat a word or a phrase that captures for you what you're taking away from our gathering today. And as you're doing that, you can listen to a poem by our resident poet, Mary Beth, who wrote this poem just a few days ago, which I experienced as a kind of blessing on this time of such great transitions in our world and our lives. And so, Mary Beth, whenever you're ready.
On the path. Early November walk. First true hints of cold reminding me to bundle up. The weather, like our country, is on the brink of change. Each day we hold our breath waiting for signs of what will be. Many of the trees along our pathway still hold leaves in startling arrays of color, but others are bare, already prepared for winter's ways. I pass a small tree with a single leaf clinging to a limb, reluctant to fall. Like the leaf, I often cling to the last days of warmth, dreading winter's chill. But this year, I welcome the change of weather, knowing spring will come again, though there are many challenges ahead. The country, too, has challenges ahead, but we will make it through. And perhaps, if we have the courage, make true the dream we have not yet managed to attain. There is hope for a new spring, a new understanding, a new flowering. I walk on past the small, nearly bare tree, looking forward to its blossoms in the spring.
Thank you, Mary Beth. If you can return to yeah, there you go. Thank you. As I blow out this candle and its essence goes out into the world, may we remember that fire and stoke those fires within us. The fire that the old woman took care of there in the cave, that nurtured all living things. The fire that was obviously within her that allowed her to recreate the world, to recreate her world in the weaving. That the fire that we need to nurture our own recreation. There it goes.
Yeah.
And then to that last slide, we say goodbye. Your inner fires be stoked and nourished during the beginning of these winter months, so that winter's incubation will serve us to create a whole new way to live in the world with springtime. Thank you for being with us. a number of others who signed up will get to see the recording. And we'll look forward to seeing again in about 4 weeks as we move into the end of our most amazing year, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody. Thank you for the film, Jen.
It was all very beautiful.